Welcome to today's professional development webinar. Today we're going to be focusing on real-world learning rooted in self-understanding, prepared for us by Joanne McEachen from the Learner First, who will be joining us shortly to lead the workshop. To start, my name is Neil from Castrips, and I'll be your host today. If there's any questions that come in or you have any technical help, you can put that in the chat or ask any questions for Joanne in the Q&A button, and I'll help sort it out. First things first, there will be a lot of resources, ideas, and websites shared in this session. Don't worry about taking any frantic notes. For anyone who's registered for this webinar, you'll receive an email with a list of resources mentioned, as well as the recording of the webinar itself after we've completed. First off, I would just briefly like to celebrate Castrips. We are celebrating quite an exciting year leading international students in our very special Global Student Exchange Program, which in 2026 will be celebrating its 10th anniversary of bringing students from all around the world together to explore really exciting destinations, Prague, Lisbon, and Peru. So I won't say any more. I'm going to leave it for just a really short video for our director of the Global Student Exchanges, Sarah D, to share with you, and then we will head on straight into the webinar. So please enjoy.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I am the director of the Global Student Exchange Programs. Here we are in beautiful Lisbon, one of our 3 GSE destination cities. In just a short 7-day itinerary, there's a lot of magic that happens here. Our GSE trips are quite different than the traditional school trip. We're bringing students from across the globe in one city to meet each other. We're stepping into that new culture together, and then we're contributing and giving back to that local destination, to the local communities. Time and time again over the years, I've seen travelers and students coming to Peru, Prague, Lisbon with their own expectations of those destinations. And come week's end, they're seeing the same destination in a totally different lens. Oftentimes they're going home with lifelong friendships, a new self-confidence. It's such a treat to watch our students find their voices, learn how to use them, challenge their own mindsets, and truly become a part of something bigger than themselves. And this is the magic of the Global Student Exchange Programs. So if you want to offer your students something truly unique and a transformative experience, join us. The Prague Spring, Peru Discovery, and Lisbon Adventure, we're all here waiting for you. Can't wait to see you.
Thanks for enjoying that new video that we've actually just published for celebrating all 2026 Global Student Exchange programs that are now ready and available on our website. But for now, I would like to introduce Joanne McEachen, who will be leading the rest of the webinar. As I mentioned, please do engage and ask any questions that you might have that pop up throughout her presentation. Joanne is a globally recognized author, keynote speaker, and social entrepreneur, and leader in education with over 35 years of experience in teaching, leadership, and system transformation. She's the author of several books, including Deep Learning, and has served as a system leader with the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, and serves on several global education boards. Joanne founded the Learner First in 2012, and today we'll speak about how contributive learning framework that they utilize at the Learner First can transform everyday learning experiences. So for the next 45 minutes, Joanne will guide all of us participants here in integrating real-world learning experiences into your curriculum by anchoring them in students' personal identities and aspirations. And yes, once again, a recording and materials mentioned throughout this presentation will be sent to registrants after the webinar has concluded. So for now, I'd like to welcome up Joanne McEachen.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Joanne McEachen tuku ingoa, ko nai tahu te iwi, ko Aotearoa te whanaunatanga. So it's lovely to be here this morning. My name is Joanne McEachen, or if you get to know me a little bit more, you'll call me Jojo. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the learnings that I've had from around the globe. I'm originally from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I introduced myself to you in my language, Māori. And that always gets me grounded in who I am and reminds me where I'm from and gives me the recognition and knowledge that I stand tall in my own identity of who I am. I currently live in Seattle, Washington. I moved over here in 2012, and I'll just share a little bit about me. So my tribe is the Waitaha, Ngāti Momoe, and Ngāi Tahu people from the South Island of New Zealand. I started out in New Zealand as a teacher, then I became a principal, then I worked for the Ministry of Education there and was a system leader. Had four major portfolios. The first one was looking at all of the professional development for our country. Second one was what are the programs that actually work for students. Third one was how do we get schools to work together when sometimes our policy settings don't actually match. And then the final one was I designed and integrated a unit called the Student Achievement Function, where we took our top 50 educators from our country and we trained them in a methodology to really look at how do we change the world from a student's point of view. I've been involved in new pedagogies for deep learning. I wrote the tools for that project along with Michael Fullen and Joanne Quinn. I'm also a Kia New Zealand award winner for services to education across the globe. And I'm an Edmund Hillary Fellow, where I work with another 500 people from around the world, where we're really looking at how do we make a difference for people. But that's kind of all the sort of technical things. I'm currently now studying back at Harvard. I'm doing a new master's there. I figured that it's time at the ripe old age of 60, that it's time to go back and do a little bit of learning and seeing what the world is about. But I was really excited when I was introduced to hear about Neil sort of talking about the trips that you're doing and the places that you go, because for me, I became an exchange student when I was 16 years old and I moved over to America then for a year. And I think that makes a really big difference. So I think different perspectives, going to different countries and seeing different people really does change who you are and gives you that opportunity to really understand. But doing so by knowing yourself first, that's really what makes the biggest important difference. So I want to share four sort of core values that come from my Mataranga Māori background that really inspire me and keep me going and make me think, sort of understand what it's really about. So for me, manaakitanga, that's really the uplifting of others so that we sort of feel generosity and kindness, and it guides how we relate to each other so that we feel valued and included. And I know when we feel like that, that's the importance of relationships and kinship and belonging. I think that's important to help each other to know that we care. Then for whanaungatanga, that kind of speaks to the importance of relationships and reminds us that learning and well-being are strengthened through authentic reciprocal connections with each other. And kaitiakitanga reflects the responsibility of protecting care for people in our environment. And so we're connected to the land, we're connected to our people, we're connected to our learning. And that sort of helps us think about that intergenerational sustainability of being able to act in service for the good of the world. And then rangatiratanga is my favorite one. It's the leadership, and it's the right and the responsibility to lead one's own life and to be really, really able to contribute to the collective whole. And it encompasses autonomy and authority, and it's acting in integrity with the benefit for everybody. So all of the work I've ever done has been around those values, and that's really been influential in my life. So what I wanted to sort of start off with by saying is that every single one of us, we have something to contribute to make the world better. Nobody in this world is born with nothing. We've all born with something, and people have something to contribute. And I sort of talk about it's just as important to sometimes for some people to get out of bed in the morning as it is for somebody to save the ocean. So everybody has to do something, can do something. And I think about the CAS trips, and I think about the creativity and the activity and the service. You know, these are designed to help you guys really experience the world and understand places that you might not be able to get to. You know, I think of some of the sustainable tourism and the volunteer projects that you guys have been doing. I think those are the ways to make contribution real. And I think what I'd like to do today is to really talk about how can we take that and move it into an everyday practice so that you're preparing for the trips, but that just becomes a regular part of your learning. So I just think, just close your eyes for a minute and just imagine a future where every child leaves the school knowing who they are, how they fit into the world, and how they can contribute to humanity, to our planet, and to prosperity. If we could have every child leaving school doing that, then I think we've got a really exciting and successful education system. So there are some four kind of key areas that we sort of think about for contributive learning. And the first one is self-understanding. Know who you are. I think about my own life, and I think until I really understood my own identity, that I am a Māori woman, that I am a New Zealand woman, that I am come from a culture that really looks at sustainability and the economics of how do we regenerate learning. That's really important to me. And I think when I really understood who I was, it made it easier for me to be able to be the leader that I chose to be. Then I look at connection. How do we connect to our land, our people, our purpose, our reason for being? And I always laugh at this little story when I went to a doctor and she said to me, Jojo, So, do you know your purpose for being alive and why you're here? And I said, but you're not a naturopath. Why would you be asking me that question? Meaning that it's that I expected it to come from a naturopath, but not my doctor. And she said, the research shows that people are happier and they're more content with their life when they have a reason or a purpose for being here and doing some of the learning that they want to do. The next one I think about is knowledge. So, what's the knowledge you need to be you? And that's your curriculum. And so, you might have a standard curriculum that comes from the country that you're living in, but what is the curriculum that's for you? What do you want to do and who do you want to be? And then the last one I talk about are the competencies. Some of you might be familiar with my work around deep learning, where we looked at creating learning progressions for the 6 competencies, the 6 C's. What I've done with this particular project is I've shortened those and made them leaner and really looked at how do we take what we know and make something from it. So we actually do something from it and we're moving along and making use of what we actually decide that we're going to do. So for me, contributive learning is learning to add to the world. We can all add something to the world, and the earlier we can figure out who we are, the better it is for us to have an opportunity to be able to do that. And I think about it's a way to build our sustainable future. So if you think about if we're learning through self-understanding, we're learning about ourselves first. We start small, we start here. Then we move out to learning about how do we fit into this world. And then we learn how do we contribute. And every tool I've ever written, you'll see a series of 3 stages. The first one is all about you, then it's all about us, then it's all about how do we make change. So if you think about that kind of as a cycle, we've got you learning through self-understanding, then you've got some input to gain some knowledge, you've got you growing strong through connections, and then your output is driving collective change and competencies. So through that, we can build a sustainable future, and the future of education is much more exciting for us all. So what are the key principles of contributive learning? I think it's grounded in the belief that education should not only build knowledge, but it has to have that sense of purpose, responsibility, and character every time we're doing it. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. So I look at holistic development. How do we make sure we get really strong, resilient, thoughtful learners who can make change, who can live through the world that we're living in today? How is it real world relevant? So whenever I'm doing any learning, I'm thinking, what are the problems in my local community that we could collectively get together and create? I think of an example of a school in Australia where the students, they were worried that their parents were getting too overweight. So they thought, how could they get them to exercise in an interesting and novel way? So they've discovered that the parents had to spend an hour on the train to work each day, each way. So that was 2 hours of their life. And so the kids thought that would be fabulous if we could actually have a exercise on the train. So they had to write to the city council, they had to write to the train owners, they had to negotiate a deal, they had to figure out which exercise materials would be able to be used on a train and not fall off and not be stolen. And so eventually, and they actually were able to do that. So there is now a train carriage in Australia and Queensland where they've got exercise there available for adults. So real world relevance makes such a difference for kids. So I think the kids trips, you're right on track with this. Then student agency, and I always talk about student agency is it's all okay until they disagree with us. So for me, student agency is when you can have really robust conversations, when we're really taking ownership of who we are and feeling confident to debate, feeling confident to say, this is what I think and why I think it. What do you think and how do you think that? And then the final one is around community and collaboration. I'm reminded in my studies at the moment that there is no way we can do anything alone. We have to do things with each other, for each other, and by each other. So to me, it's about how do we learn to do this in community? How do we learn to do this collaborating? And later I'm going to share an example of one school that's been doing this really, really well. So I'll go through those 4 outcomes again. Understand who you are. Stand tall. We have a phrase in Māori, tu tangata, stand tall in your own being. Know yourself, be sure about who you are, and then you can contribute everything that you want to contribute. Connect with other people in the world around you, and especially people who don't look, sound, feel, taste, or are like you. I think where we're experiencing in the world at the moment, a reality where we're challenged when we're not like each other, and how do we figure out how to work together? So connect with people around you. That helps you to learn about who you are, and it's exactly what you guys are doing. And when you're developing the knowledge about the world around you and its workings, I always think about learn through who you are first. I think people sometimes call that place-based learning or thinking about where are you locally. Learn through what you know first, and then you can start to add knowledge to that, which helps you to transfer that knowledge going further and further out. And then collaborate and communicate with one another, like thinking really critically about what we're doing creatively. And creativity is not arts. It's the actual ability to be an entrepreneur. It's to think, it's to create, it's to try and create different ways of doing things. And then to commit to solve problems and design these together. So those are the four kind of key outcomes that we're really looking for. And when we bring those all together, we have a learner who is able to be a contributor, and we call that contributive learning. So self-understanding, connection, competency, and knowledge. And if you think about those key areas, there's always places that we can look at just within our own environment. And it doesn't have to be fancy, it can be small or it can be big. A few important things to think about as we move forward. We sort of know you're creating trips and you're going on a trip, but what we'd love to do is to think about how do you do this every day? So this is a learning design process, and the linking of these learning goals can be carried out in a single day, regardless of the curriculum area, the goals, or the daily planning activities. The goal is to set a point where you're consistently thinking about how to link other objectives so that the processes like this just become second nature. So every time we're thinking about contributive learning, it doesn't have to be a great big project. It can be something that you're doing really little and small. It can be a tiny classroom experience, or it can just as something that's going to improve other people's lives or add to their world. I think those are the sorts of things that we're thinking about. And it doesn't, I think, it's omnicurricular. It doesn't have to be in one area. It can be everything. We do a lot of work around the area of maths because people often think contributive learning sounds fluffy, wuffy, woo-woo. So what we do is we say, here we go, let's show you how we do this in math, because every day we can contribute to the real world. How do we do it? Well, we start off by thinking about how can we integrate? So we've got our academic learning that every single one of you will have a curriculum or a set of tools that you have to cover or teach. What we do is we add to it the well-being or the soft skills, the well-being, social and emotional learning, whatever you want to call it, we can add that in there. But the four that we use, and what we often use with the school districts and the countries that we work with, we talk about our skills and objectives around self-understanding, connection, and competency. And then when we put those together, we take an objective from academic learning, an objective from well-being, and we put that together and we create contributive learning. And we're simultaneously designing, assessing, and teaching through those key areas. So let's break it down and have a little bit of a look at self-understanding as the first one that we want to look at. What is self-understanding? Why is it essential for meaningful and real-world learning? So let's look at the four key areas that we have, the four dimensions. We've got identity. So where do you come from? Who are you? Place. Where are you from and where are you now? Your purpose. What's your purpose for learning and how do you learn? And your capacity. Do you know how you can learn? And I'll give you an example later of a school that uses this to help their students every morning. So let's just go deeper and take a look at identity. I'd like you just to take some time and just have a think about what makes you you, what lights you up, what challenges you, and how do you learn and grow best. So think about some of those questions. And I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'm going to let you read the dimension, think about those questions, and then maybe come up with a decision about where you might be sitting on that continuum of learning. You'll get a copy of this full progression, but this is just the top lines just so we can use this as an example. So I'm just going to give you a minute or 90 seconds to just have a bit of a read and think about where you might be on that. If you have any comments, you're welcome to throw them into the chat box and I can respond to that if you wish to ask any questions, or if you'd like to make any comments about where you might see yourself on getting started, making progress, looking promising, well on track, or geared for success. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, when we're thinking about using these tools, we have a sorry, there's a question there too. Is it common to feel like we are across multiple levels? Yes, it is very common to feel you're across multiple levels. One of the things that when I'm looking at these tools is that we start off with knowing who you are. So getting started, looking promising is about knowing how you fit into the world, and then geared for success is taking action. Now, on any one of these times when I'm thinking about a particular problem or solving a problem, I could be at any level. Sometimes when I'm doing my learning at university, I go back to I'm getting started because I'm just beginning stuff, and you can move across. The most important thing about using these tools is to think about, how do we know? I talk about self-assessment as the purest form of assessment of all. And what we do with that is to say, if we know who we are, then we're the ones who tell us when we leave school whether we're doing any good or not. We're the ones who tell us all of the time. We're giving ourselves feedback. So it's really important to understand ourselves. How do we know what work makes us work, what lights us up, what's tough for us, etc. So you can go up and down these. If you're working with a student, we use a process where we do an interview, we figure out who the student is, we ask them some of these questions to really figure out where they sit. And then whenever we're teaching any content area, we're taking one objective from the identity set of objectives and then one from the content curriculum. So if you look at these, when we look at the learning progression, people often find it a little bit fluffy. They say and as the question was, it's hard to know exactly where do we stand in which level. It's not so much important the level that you're sitting at, it's are you traveling and are you developing and are you growing? And so what we decided to do is that we thought we'd make some skills and objectives so that it was much easier for teachers to really concretely say, yes, they can do this or not. So if we look at the skills and objectives, we say understand and celebrate cultural identity and the identity of their family. And then what we're looking for is some different examples of how we know they are doing that. And I'll show you some of those in our global examples in a few minutes. Can they identify and describe different feelings, emotions, along with their causes and effects? Can they do that? If they're looking at a science project, can they describe and identify the emotions of different animals when they're working in smaller groups, things like that? I'm just making this up. But I think the things are to really think about, how do we know whether or not children are able to do this? And if I go back to looking across the continuum, that's the storyline that we're trying to have. We're starting small and we're slowly getting to the stage where I can take action when I know something matters to me. And then we do that by identifying the skill level and the objective. Okay, keep asking questions if you have anything. So what I'd like to do now is to shift into some global examples. What does this look like in practice and what are the outcomes? Because it's really important that when we're taking some of these tools that we can see them in action, because that helps us to learn. So I want to start with my first example, and this is Te Pā Orokohotu, which is a small village school in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They have students of 300 students, and they feed 1,000 people a day through their land use. What they've done is they've reclaimed some land, and they've taken place-based learning, and they're really looking at, how do we build the future? How do we create a whole new learning village? And we're doing so by healing the land and by actually teaching the children to grow vegetables, to feed the local people, to sell vegetables. So that's the entrepreneurial side. So they're actually looking at flywheels to start to create funding for themselves in the future. So this school I've been working with the school for a wee while. They've been around since 2015. They've really struggled in the context of the country, a Māori school, but they are doing extremely well. I'm going to try playing this video for you, and if you can't hear it, can somebody let me know?
Here in this island, the native bush and the native trees were cleared to allow for houses to be built. They discovered that those lands were actually wetlands and marshlands. To build on that, they had to drain it all. 200 years later, you are dealing with the fallout of that.
The land to us is who we are. Without the land, we are nothing.
That's why we started Te Pā Orokohotu, what we call a learning village.
we do our learning outside of the classroom.
By rebuilding our cultural connection to the land, we can nurture the whole being of our children.
Pukumata is a number of restorative projects. One of those is soil restoration and soil remediation, habitat restoration, food gardens.
And with that, we can bring nature back in those spaces.
We have green waste and food waste. When we're mixing that together to create a compost that helps us create a soil that's easy to grow food.
Winning the prize would allow us to fully realise our vision to build an 8-hectare garden and composting operation on our new site. But perhaps most importantly, winning the Zaid Sustainability Prize would mean that our children, our culture, and our way of life is being acknowledged as a vital part of the world's future.
Sorry. So what's really interesting about Te Pā Ōrau Hotu is they did win the Sustainability Prize. So the Global Sustainability Prize for all high schools across from the Pacific and Asia section of the world, and they were invited to Abu Dhabi at the beginning of this year. So from a tiny little school in New Zealand to win such a massive global prize, and it's only because they're really focusing on who they are. So if you have a look at their mission, you think about what they're looking to do. They've got 4 R's. So one is restore, get the language going again, get our culture and identity, focus on our knowledge, focus on the health and well-being. Then we reconnect. So, and you can see similar things, the sense of what I was talking about earlier, you can see that coming through in their work. They've chosen different ways to describe it, but what they're doing is they're reflecting who they are. They want to reconnect their family and communities, their places, their ways of being. They want to reignite the home fires. So from the ancestor that built that particular area, they want to reignite that and reclaim that land to be who they are. And they have a passion, they want all their kids to have a passion for lifelong learning. They want to reset so that they can reach the highest mountain. So we look at our mountains as our ancestors, and they want every child to experience success in their school lives so that they leave our school with Māori succeeding as Māori. They can be who they are. So that's where you get that real sense of self-understanding, that self-determination, that we have the ability to do those kinds of things. It's a really interesting system to see how they are working with their local people, with the land, to really reclaim and recreate a better education system for them. So I think that gives you a really good example of how you can think about when you know who you are, you can behave in that way. What we look for in our schools that we work with is that every school has an identity also. So you start off with thinking about yourself, and then you move to the identity of your class, then you move to the identity of your school and then your community. And when we know ourselves well enough, we can take this work and we can grow it. The next school I'd like to share a little bit about is Korporu Secondary School. It's nicknamed Coops. And we've been working with them for quite a few years now. And one of the things that's really interesting about them is that they focus on contributive learning at the school level. So they think they've got parent and advisory that work side by side with school staff. So they don't have separate parent meetings. They don't have separate student meetings. They all join together and they work together as a way of creating the future. The elders that they have, the Aboriginal elders, you can see the First Nations outdoor learning area in the centre photo there. They guide the build and the way the school works. And the best part of this, I think this is the most interesting one, and a lot of schools will probably be quite surprised at this, is that on a Friday they have student success days. So they don't have regular classes. The students determine how they're going to learn. Now they do that by using the learning progressions that we've talked about. So there's one for self-understanding, there's one for connection, and one for competency. And each time we're looking at how do we grow not just ourselves, but our schools. One of the things that the education department in Queensland does is they survey every school every year on how they feel about the school. And 95% of people are saying that Korporu is a great school because they're creating tomorrow together. And what we've noticed around working with this school is that they step outside of the regular learning of the 4 walls of a classroom, and they are always going out into the world. So that's another really good example of a high school. Another school we've got, this is one in Australia also. This is Brisbane's South State School, and they've just become an IB school, so they'll be coming along to your team now as well. And they have done a really interesting thing. So before they start their school day, they start off in the morning with what they call their Learnerpreneur program. And they use the self understanding and the connection tools to actually get the children to start their day by thinking about what is it that they want to learn and how are they going to learn it. So they have responsibility for organizing their day. Now, the reason we know this works is I was at another school, and one of the deputy principals came up to me and said, "I can't believe what you've done to my child." And I had no idea what she was talking about, but it turns out that her child that morning had told her when she was going to school today, and she's 13 years of age, she was going to start learning this particular area. She's going to involve these learning partners to help her to understand her objectives that she's decided and taken from the curriculum. And she's looked at her learning progression, and she's decided that she wants to move along a little bit. And the way she's going to do that is she's going to engage with community members, and they're going to help her to feel more confident about her knowledge. And they're going to go into the community and solve a problem. And the deputy principal said to me she can't even describe her own learning journey like that. And she was astounded that these kids at 13 years of age were able to describe what they were going to be doing, and that they had these enterprise projects that they could use with to do with their wider community. They also partner with the Queensland University, and I think that makes a really big difference. They have a program there, enterprise project that they can go and they can contribute to. So I think to me, it's really important that we're continuously thinking about what are the ways that we can actually get the kids to engage in the real world, be at university already when they're at school, or have different opportunities to engage in the different ways of thinking in the world. An example here in the United States, we're working with Cheney Public Schools in Washington State. And they have been working together to really look at themselves, to look at what they can do to understand and make what they're doing measurable. So they've created a student portfolio, but they hadn't measured it. And I think that's what a lot of people have done too, is they're creating student portfolios, but they're not sure how to measure them. So what we've done is we've looked at together with them, what are their goals, and we're helping to make what they believe is important measurable. So when we talk about measuring, we're looking at authentic mixed method assessment, and we have a mix of qualitative and quantitative data that we pull together. So we take from the curriculum content, we're looking at academic results, we're looking at the social and emotional learning results, and we're synthesizing those together. And the reason that we synthesize that together is because we think that gets you a better answer about where kids are at and what they need to learn next, and they have that opportunity to do that too. So they've been working with us, and what we're working on them with this year is we're helping them to sort of figure out pilot and trial teams to work on a portrait of the graduate to get that actual evidence on the ground of what does it look like and how does it work, and it's providing that opportunity for having that synthesis of knowledge. So taking 4 or 5 pieces of data, synthesizing that and saying, so what does this mean for our kids, and then what will we do with that next? So I think those are some things to really consider when you're looking at assessment. The experience, Lisbon through the eyes of women who know best, I think this was a really wonderful experience, and I think this is really another great example of how we can do, how everybody can contribute. And as a grandma myself, I think it's really important that we look at the ages of people making a positive contribution, having elderly people's homes beside early childhood centres in several countries. We're seeing that start to happening. And when grandma can come to work, it's the integration of who we are, and it makes us feel who we are to make a positive contribution. So I think, connect to grannies in our own communities, do all that sort of stuff, because they have got so much to offer, and it'd be an exciting experience for everybody. So the way we look at it is that it's one action and one intention. So we start off with, through the cycle of how we do this, is we think about what's the learning progression that we're focusing on. Where does the student need to have some help the most? Do they know who they are? If they already know who they are, let's move on to connection. Do they know how to connect? If they know how to connect, let's move on to competency. But let's look at the learning progression, and let's help them figure out, by using all of the world around them, how they know where they sit. Then we look for skills and objectives in the dimensions of, if we're looking at the self-understanding, we'd be looking at the identity, and we'd be saying, which skill and objective do we want to choose after we've done our initial analysis of where the students are at. Then we start to look for practical activities for students and teachers and families. Now, you will get all of these materials for you today to take away with you, and they'll be sent to you, and you can have a look at them. Feel free to reach out to email me and ask if you want any support or any help with any of these. We're really willing to work with people all over the world. We work in Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada, Dubai, Hong Kong, and we have worked in other countries as well. So feel free to reach out if you do want to have further advice on that. But I think these are the tools that you'll be able to have. You'll be able to use them, see if they work for you. If they don't, then sing out to us. For me, it's about we want to develop self-understanding for each and every student that we have. We want to help them cultivate the knowledge that they need to have. And I think that knowledge places a really big piece that we want to have a big deep dive into. And that's what we can do by doing, getting out of our schools, going to different places. How do we learn about what's really going on in the world? And how do we learn if it's relevant to us? I think those are sort of the key questions I would have around that. And then we want to foster that competency so that we're creating children who know how to make change, who know how to be entrepreneurial in their thinking, who know how to solve problems, who know how to connect with each other. I think those are the most important things that we're looking for in creating that space. And we want them to be able to make connections. How do we connect to each other, to ourselves, to our land, to the world? And then we don't want to bring people down. I think the world is really struggling at the moment. We want to be able to find a way to lift people up. So if we think about contribution as a way to lift people up in the world and not to subtract from the world and take people down. And then if you contribute in your own way, in your way every day, then that way it makes it so much more interesting for each person. So I just want to have a bit of a closing reflection as we're thinking. I want you to think about, and I'd like you to put it in the chat box if you can, what's one way you'll bring more self-understanding into your learning environment experiences tomorrow, either for yourself or for your students? So think about that again. What's one way you can bring self-understanding into learning environments and experiences tomorrow for yourself or for your students? So have a go at doing that, and let's share some of those ideas in the chat box. Okay, while you're thinking about that, we've got a question, so I'll take that question. I think one of the hardest things to learn about is how we deal with things we cannot control. Are there any programs or frameworks that help people with insecure identities find more skills about this? We sometimes have to work around uncontrolled things to actually make change. One of the things that I think about and thinking about, it's a really good question, is that we have the tools that we have is to help children and adults. So we have a set of tools for adults as well. So we have the learning progressions that we have, the ones that you've seen, the one that you've had a look at, the self-understanding one. We have one for adults too, which is a much deeper dive into who we are. And I think we can't control, what we can control is how we react to what happens around us. And when we feel really secure in our own identity, and we feel like we can contribute to a conversation or feel comfortable and confident, that's how we can help to make things that little bit better. So for me, it's like using the tools to teach people the skills, because these are skills that we have to learn. If we don't get taught them at home and we don't get taught them at school, it's really challenging to ever learn them. So I think using the learning progression, it teaches you what does it look like when you're really successful and what does it look like when you're still just learning and starting out. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an answer to do that. But I think it's just going back and just slowly teaching your way through those skills. And then the next question was, start with sharing some successful examples of our students and see if there are similar issues we're experiencing locally. I think that's a great way of doing that too, is to really think about what can we do and how can we contribute? I think those are really important to find out what are the little problems, and success breeds success. So I think the faster you go to trying to help children feel success immediately, then we can move into a better space for them. Any other questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat or ask any questions overall. I think the key things for me is that contributive learning is really about how do we make a difference in the world to enable people to be the best they can be? And how do we do that in a system that's quite challenging with so much content knowledge? So for me, it's that when we know who we are, we then help to understand what it is we're going to be learning about. Okay, any further questions? I'll just come back to this one to finish off with then, reminding everybody that if we integrate both academic and wellbeing together, that's the opportunity we have to be successful with everyone. I think we have start with your curriculum, have a look at the learning progressions and the skills and objectives that we've created and you're getting a copy of, and then design your learning from that. And then when you're assessing, you're also assessing the identity of your students to help them to become those confident people that you want to become. But most of all, it's to learn to be comfortable in your own skin, to be confident in who you are, and letting people be successful in their own worlds. And we have one more question. You mentioned the difficulties of giving student agency, but when they butt up against our rules, do you have thoughts or suggestions regarding this? Absolutely. I've written quite a lot on student agency, and feel free to have a look on my LinkedIn account where I've got quite a few articles around this. I think the thing that is the most interesting is that we have to teach children how to butt up against our rules. So there's different ways of doing this. So there's processes. So it's the teaching them of when you have a disagreement or when you don't agree with something, how do you frame that? How do you respond to that? And you can start off with really small things that aren't going to be, it could be just like sharing. How do you share? So you're starting to do things like that. So you're not pushing kids into spaces that they're uncomfortable with. But the bottom line is if we don't teach children how to be agentic in their own classroom, and our teachers to be agentic in their own classroom, then it's very challenging for them to actually have agency over their own life. So use the tools again to really, really step that up. Okay, do we have any other questions?
That last one was really insightful. If anyone has any last questions, perfect time. Thank you so much for everything you shared, Joanne.
You're welcome.
That was really great. Let's just give everyone a last minute if they have anything else. But otherwise, I really appreciate everything you shared. I think there's a lot of really interesting takeaways, especially from the varied examples that you shared, especially for our global audience. So everyone will probably need to go back and re-listen to little aspects of the recording. So once again, thank you so much for sharing. If there's no other questions, we will wrap up with the recording here.
Great. It's been a real pleasure, and good luck with all of your trips. I think what you're doing is incredible to create that opportunity for children to provide service to their community. So if you need any help, sing out. Really happy to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.